Most billionaires get a grand funeral, a marked grave, maybe a statue if they're feeling generous about their own legacy. Jeffrey Epstein got none of that. He got an unmarked slab in a Florida cemetery with his own parents' names scrubbed off the stone next to him. Which raises an obvious question: if the case against him was already falling apart in the court of public opinion, why bury him like a secret? Chapter 2. The Night. It happened. It was August 10th, 2019, and Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to be the most closely watched inmate in America. He was a convicted sex offender, now facing federal sex trafficking charges that could have sent him to prison for the rest of his life, and prosecutors were widely expected to use him to build cases against other powerful people in his orbit. He was being held at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan in the Special Housing Unit, the part of the jail reserved for inmates who need extra protection. He should never have been alone. Epstein had already attempted suicide, or appeared to, less than 3 weeks earlier. After that, jail staff were supposed to check on him every 30 minutes. His cellmate, who would have been another set of eyes in the room, had just been transferred out. And on his final night, the 2 guards assigned to watch his unit didn't check on him for hours. They were later accused of falsifying the logs to make it look like they had. At some point that night, Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell. He was pronounced dead a short time later. And almost instantly, before the body had even left the building, 2 competing stories started forming, and they would never fully agree again. Chapter 3. What the autopsy actually found. The official autopsy was carried out by the New York City office of the chief medical examiner. Their conclusion was direct. Cause of death, hanging. Manner of death, suicide. Case closed, at least on paper. But there was a detail in that autopsy that refused to stay quiet. Epstein's neck showed multiple fractures, including a break in the hyoid bone, a small fragile bone that sits up near the voice box. And that detail mattered, because forensic experts have long pointed out that hyoid fractures are unusual in hanging deaths, especially in younger people, but are more commonly associated with manual strangulation. Sitting in the room during that autopsy was a man named Dr. Michael Baden, a former New York City chief medical examiner himself, hired by Epstein's brother to observe. Baden didn't buy the suicide ruling. He said the injuries looked more consistent with homicidal strangulation than with hanging. He wasn't some random internet sleuth. He was one of the most credentialed forensic pathologists in the country, publicly contradicting the official report. The medical examiner's office didn't budge. They stood by their finding. The FBI eventually reviewed the case and said they found no criminality in how Epstein died. The Justice Department's internal watchdog went further in a different direction entirely. They didn't clear the jail, they tore it apart, cataloging a long list of failures in how Epstein was supervised that night. So now there were 2 separate findings, and they didn't really argue with each other. One said he wasn't murdered. The other said the people responsible for keeping him alive utterly failed to do their jobs. Both of those things turned out to be true. Neither one explained why the body told a stranger story. Chapter 4. The tape that wouldn't stay still. If the hyoid bone was the first crack in the official story, the surveillance footage was the second, and this one took years to even surface. For most of the case's life, the public was told there was video evidence from outside Epstein's cell that night. For years, nobody outside law enforcement had actually seen it. Then in 2025, under public pressure, the Justice Department finally released what they called the raw footage. Almost immediately, people noticed something. Right around midnight, the timestamp jumped. A full minute of footage was simply gone. This is exactly the kind of detail conspiracy theories are built from. And to be fair, this time the suspicion wasn't coming from nowhere. Forensic video experts who examined the released clip found it had actually been stitched together from at least 2 separate segments using editing software, even though officials had promised it was untouched, raw footage straight off the system. Attorney General Pam Bondi offered an explanation. She said the prison's recording system reset every single night, and that minute always vanished as a matter of routine. Then more footage surfaced, and it showed the missing minute. It had been there all along, meaning whatever caused the gap in the first release It wasn't a nightly system reset like she'd claimed. Nobody has ever fully explained why the first version the public saw was missing footage that it turned out existed the entire time. Chapter 5: The Search for a Body and a Burial Built to Disappear. While all of this argument was happening in public, away from the cameras, Epstein's body was already gone in the most literal sense. His brother Mark claimed the remains. There was a private funeral at a Manhattan funeral home, and then Epstein was cremated, which by itself ended any chance of a future exhumation, any chance that some future forensic expert could do what was eventually done with Hitler's remains decades after his death and settle the argument with hard evidence. Once those ashes existed, the body's secrets, whatever they were sealed for good. His ashes were placed in a crypt at the I.J. Morris Star of David Cemetery in Palm Beach County, Florida, in the same family vault as his parents. And then came the strangest detail of all. The crypt was left deliberately unmarked. According to multiple reports, the engraved plaque that had marked his parents' resting place for years was removed and replaced with a blank slab, specifically so nobody could find Epstein's name and target the site. It worked, in a sense. There's no headstone for protesters to vandalize, no shrine for conspiracy tourists to visit. But it also meant that one of the most scrutinized deaths in modern American history ended with literally nothing to point to. No grave, no marker, no remains left to ever test again. Chapter 6: Why the Theories Never Died. So if the science mostly supports suicide, and the missing footage explanation turned out to be false but ultimately just sloppy rather than sinister, why does this story refuse to go away? Because Epstein wasn't an ordinary inmate, and everyone knew it. He had spent years cultivating relationships with presidents, princes, and billionaires. He had already used money and connections once before to walk away from similar charges with a shockingly light plea deal back in 2008. People who watched that happen reasonably wondered whether the same forces might be at work again, not necessarily to kill him, but simply to make sure inconvenient testimony never happened. Add to that a chief medical examiner's office defending its own work, a credentialed second pathologist publicly disagreeing, federal guards accused of falsifying logs, and a piece of evidence video that genuinely was edited when officials swore it wasn't. And you don't need an elaborate conspiracy to explain the suspicion. You just need official institutions to keep contradicting themselves in public, which is exactly what happened over and over for years. That's the part that makes this case different from a typical powerful man dies suspiciously story. The mistakes were real and documented. The cover-up, if there even was one, might have just been bureaucratic panic and lazy explanations dressed up to sound authoritative. But once an institution is caught saying something false on camera, like a missing minute that wasn't actually missing, every other claim they make afterward gets read with suspicion, fair or not. Chapter 7: What's actually left strip away. The speculation, and here's what's actually verifiable. Epstein died in his cell in the early hours of August 10, 2019. The official cause was hanging, the official manner was suicide, and multiple federal reviews have landed on that same conclusion more than once, including a fresh look ordered years later that reached the identical result. The neck fractures remain genuinely unusual, and a respected pathologist still disputes the finding to this day. The missing minute of video turned out not to be missing after all, just badly explained the first time around. And the body itself, the one piece of physical evidence that could theoretically settle lingering questions for good, no longer exists in any form that could ever be re-examined. Which means, unlike Hitler's remains, dug up, hidden, fought over, and eventually forensically confirmed decades later, Epstein's case will likely never get that kind of final, dramatic confirmation. There's no skull fragment waiting in an archive somewhere, no jawbone for a future forensic expert to match 70 years from now. There's ash in a crypt with no name on it, and maybe that's exactly the point. A grave invites questions. A blank slab in a cemetery most people will never visit just lets the story end, at least the part involving his body. The part involving everyone who knew him, that story is still very much being written.